think the key is to recognize, Gail, but also to kind of reiterate, that initiative began as a grassroots effort of neighborhoods and community that loved the neighborhood, that wanted to preserve it and understood more of what went into all the things you just shared. And then the collaboration between Audubon and Circa has been an incredible resource, and collaboration together to learn about what are the best methodologies to be able to kind of preserve and sustain a natural-based kind of solution. I think the other critical point that needs to be made is there were no borders. The water thresholds, when it comes in, it doesn't care if you're Bridgeport, Fairfield, Southport, Milford, Stratford. I think we all need to work together to create a coastline so that everybody can appreciate it. I think another critical element that we need to explore is, look, people who love living at the beach benefit from the beauty of it. But you're also learning that there's tremendous risk at play here. And so our next speaker, panelist, is Ms. Becky Bunnell. She is the Fairfield Flood and Erosion Control Board Chair, and she's also a board member on the Fairfield Beach Residents Association. Now, she has been working tirelessly with all the groups that we're talking about here, but also recognizing you've got homeowners. In fact, the Fairfield, Bridgeport, South St. Mary by the Sea, Black Rock area has the highest concentration of homes anywhere in the Connecticut coastline. So how do we kind of balance the challenge that we have of development that already exists, but manage the erosion, undertake some of the initiatives, and Becky, that's where you come in to teach us all about that. Welcome. Jackson can manage that wherever he is.
Okay.
Okay.
So remember when Rob showed you that lovely sandy beach with the marshes behind it and this wonderful sort of high marshes and low marshes? That's what Fairfield used to look like back in the 1700s. We didn't have all the houses you've got now. We had, some rocky outcrops that came down like Sasko Hill, but mostly we had, particularly in our main floodplain, we had these wonderful marshy sandy beaches, and it was basically people, like all of us, who came in and we built up, and that's an issue.
You gotta point at the computer.
Oh. So as Tony mentioned, the town of Fairfield has the largest, highest value of real estate at risk of any town in Connecticut, and we have over 3,000 structures now in that floodplain that should have been all marshes and sand.
In fact, this school
is
in a
sitting in a
floodplain.
floodplain.
And part of the challenge we have is the fact that you can't make significant renovation because it is in a floodplain.
Yeah, and we have churches, we have 3 other schools too, some of them are not the public schools, but it's 15% of our town homes. We've got a peninsula that has 220 homes on it that's built basically on a sand spit. So the reality is, what is it that we as a town need to think about from a resilience standpoint? And there's certain areas of the town we're going to be able to add a little more resilience to, and there's certain that over time, if the sea keeps going up, the way Jim was talking about, we're going to have to retreat, and we need to recognize that and acknowledge that. But there are things we can do in that interim period to protect those homes and protect some of the infrastructure. Everyone remembers what happened with Sandy. We had a major hurricane. I'm just showing you a few pictures, but we lost quite a few houses. There were houses floating in the creek. Rooster River is another part of our town that we have to be aware of. In 2018, we had a massive rain bomb, which basically had flooding all around the Rooster River area, and many, many homes had significant flooding. So we get riverine flooding, we get coastal flooding. We also get downtown flooding, and this is where Jim and his team at Circa came in and helped us do an underpass study. But as he mentioned, a core part of being able to evacuate safely is being able to get out of a flood area to a higher ground. And if all your underpasses are impassable, we have one that goes over the railroad track, so we're all gonna be going there to get over. But what do you do? And what do you do to make sure that people are safe?
Becky, was that the winter storm? And this is the downtown area?
This
the
was
water?
This was actually several years ago.
Okay, yeah.
This was quite a few years ago. We've since done some mitigation actually and adaptation in this area. I don't know if you remember when we dug up Sherman Green and we put basically a whole detention piping system in there, which allowed us to absorb some of the water. So that's already one piece, but there's actually more that we have to do in the downtown area. And we've got about a $9 million project budget, or no, we don't have a budget for it. We have a proposal that needs about $9 million to help us mitigate some of the other downtown flooding. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this. We've been talking about the sea level rise, but we are gonna be doing a study. The town of Fairfield's gonna be doing a study looking at what's gonna happen to our town, and what will our town look like in 2050, which is expected to have up to 20 inches of sea level rise by 2050. We also have asked them, and even though we know this has a lot more variability in it, we've asked them to look at what would our town look like at 2100. And again, we know there's a lot of hypothesis going into what the sea levels will look like then, but it'd be nice to know if our town hall's gonna be underwater on a regular basis and be able to plan for that kind of thing. So as Tony had sort of mentioned, the current predictions are for above average Atlantic hurricane season this year. We're supposed to get 23 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and a 65% chance of landfall somewhere on the East Coast. But what's scary is this last bullet, a 1 in 3 chance of having a named storm hit our Connecticut coastline. Now that doesn't mean it'll be a hurricane, it could just be a named storm, but like Superstorm Sandy was. But a 1 in 3 chance is kind of a scary thing, and that's why we've got our CERT team here to help us understand what is it.
And imagine hitting at high tide.
Yeah.
Because Sandy hit at low tide.
Well, Sandy, the wind changed 2 hours into Sandy, that actually it would have been much worse if that wind shift had not occurred, which was another factor. So this was what, Hurricane Sandy was huge. It was hundreds of miles across. It did about $70 billion of damage. And what's scary, and Jim had mentioned this before, is you used to get a Sandy level hurricane, every 500 years, whatever. Now, with sea level rise and with the warming of the ocean, we're gonna start to see a Sandy level storm much more often. And you might see it as often as every 5 years. So why is that? So right now, the hurricane season goes from June 1 to November 30th, but the peak is around September 10th or so. And most of the activity is going to be between August and October. So Sandy, as you recall, was at the end of October. So just because we don't get one in the summertime doesn't mean we're not going to get one. And the reason we're expecting above average is warmer oceans, which fuel the larger storms. La Nina is developing, and La Nina years are going to be linked with more storms in the Atlantic. We're also seeing, and I got a little education from Jim on this, record temperatures in the ocean, and warmer oceans just lead to more storms. But it's really kind of scary what we're seeing in terms of potentially at least the upper level of the ocean. This is I think a NOAA chart showing the average temperatures of the upper level of the Atlantic Ocean. And as you can see through the dotted line, for a long time, this is across January to January, they were fairly all grouped in the same area. But something weird happened in 2023, which is that sort of orange line. We started to see a much more warmer ocean. And that little red line over on the far side, January, February, March, is the start of 2024. So already, we're way ahead of where we have been in historical years. So that's another reason that they're predicting a higher hurricane. This was something that the Connecticut Department of Emergency Management showed us before, and it shows you the return periods of various kinds of storms. So a category 1, which is 75 miles an hour or 95 miles an hour of wind, their return period, meaning on average, how often would you expect one? Once every 18 years, or there's a 1 in 18 chance every year of it happening. The last time a category 1 happened was 85, so we're 21 years overdue for a category 1 hurricane in our area. Category 2, much higher winds, we're at 96 to 110. That return period is 40 years, so actually since 85 was the last time we had a Cat 2, that would be next year, we're expecting that. Category 3, much higher winds, return period is 70 years, and that again, the average return would suggest that we might get one this year. So lots of pretty interesting things to make you a little bit nervous. I'm now going to turn it over to Shakti, who is a third grader at McKinley, and she's going to share some of her perspective of what climate change means to her.
Hi, my name is Shakti, and I'm in third grade from McKinley Elementary School. I am here to talk What do you think is in common between these movies? The Little Mermaid, Finding Nemo, and Finding Dory. The ocean and beautiful, colorful coral reefs and happy sea creatures. Did you know coral reefs are the rainforests of the ocean? They keep our oceans and planet healthy. What's the connection of Goldilocks and the coral reef? Let's see. On the left you see a healthy coral reef and a happy sea turtle. On the right you see a bleached coral reef and an unhappy sea turtle. How does Goldilocks come in? Just like how Goldilocks likes her porridge not too hot or not too cold, and just right, the coral reef needs the ocean temperature to be just right to grow. Fishes and other organisms find food, reproduce, and live their young in many ways, and many nooks and crannies formed by coral. Global warming leads to higher ocean temperatures than normal, which are continuously increasing every year. The warmer the ocean temperature, the more heat energy is available, and the higher potential for tropical cyclones to develop.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Thus resulting in the intense hurricane. In tropical hurricanes and extremes.
Mom's always the best, right?
Human pollution makes burning fossil fuels and the aluminium effect increases the water temperature in the Atlantic Ocean. Coral reefs provide coastal protection from hurricanes, but due to coral bleaching, it does not help reduce intensity. Intense hurricanes cause a lot of life and property damage. It is our duty to be conscious and reduce the carbon footprint and cut human pollution to help save our planet. Thank you for listening.
Becky, can you say her name and explain what a great job she did?
Yeah, I mean, she worked very hard on that, and I think it's wonderful how she was able to bring sort of some of our cultural things that we see in our movies to life and show how that actually impacts what we're actually going to be going through.
And she is a third grader. God bless. That is remarkable. You have some more slides.
I have a couple more slides, and I'm going to go through what our current Fairfield resilience plans are. So we had the Army Corps of Engineers come in 2019 and do a study of our whole coastline to tell us if we were to make this, totally resilient against a Superstorm Sandy kind of level, up to the FEMA standards actually, so even a little higher than Superstorm Sandy. What would we do and what would it cost us? Next slide, please. They proposed a whole scenario where we basically build a lot of walls and berms and things along the coastline. You can see sort of the yellow and, actually I have a pointer here. It ties into the high ground of Saskatoon Hill. Then you go over to the high ground of where the wastewater treatment plant is and our solar array. Then you have walls that would go along the Reef Road, along Kentfield Road. Then you have your dune, you're already along Jennings, which is already high. But then you go into your Ash Creek area and you have another wall. So lots of walls, lots of hard structures. And it was basically a $546 million project. And it just doesn't make any sense for our town, to be honest. Who wants to live in a town with these big steel walls all over the place? And it's not a nature-based solution. We have a weird coastline. This is where the hurricane would go. So like category 1 would be the yellow, category 2, category 3, category 4. So the water in a large storm is going to go well over 95, well over Route 1. It's going to inundate all of our homes that are all mostly in this area. But the key that we need to be aware of is the water comes in lots of places. It comes in through here, it comes in through here. There's lots of low places, so it's not like you can just go and put something up and you've got to have to close all of those low places if you really want to protect this area. So we have to think carefully about what it is we're going to do in this kind of a geography. Next slide, please. So we are right now trying to secure the budget for a 2024 master town plan. This will look at riverine, it'll also look at coastal flooding. And it would be a master resilience plan We could choose to do nothing and say to people, hey, you live here, raise your house, hopefully if the water will go out and it'll go right back in and you'll be fine. Or we could add some level of protection, something like protection to a Sandy or Irene or a nor'easter level, that would basically, raising a few roads, so we have evacuation plans, maybe putting in a few berms that would help protect some of the areas, but not putting in these, 6 or 8 foot walls that the Army Corps is. Or you have the Army Corps plan, which is adding protection to a FEMA recommended height level, which is about elevation 16. And that, cost us $546 million. So we're probably gonna end up being somewhere in this area. So once we do our work, our challenge will be to look at what are some of the resilience options that we have, and what are the costs of those. So we have a couple projects I'm just gonna quickly go through. Next slide, please. We've already done some of the work, which is great. And we have ARPA funding that's funded some of the other things. Our wastewater treatment plant is already hardened to a high enough level, which is really important because the last thing you want is sewage washing into the sound. We've also got a lot of funding for the Rooster River area. We had $3.25 million from ARPA funding, and then an additional joint grant with Bridgeport of another couple million. We're working on the Southport Perry's Green Bulkhead right now, and we have done some work with downtown infrastructure flooding, but we have some more to go. We've also looked at we're putting bonding and capital appropriations in our capital plan to redo our tide gates. Tide gates are critical for us. They make our marshes really work. So the idea of a tide gate is that you can channel the water in or out depending on whether you open the tide gate or close it. So we can either hold the water back or we could let water out, depending on how we manage our tide gates. And that's really important to have a tide gate system. Yes.
During Hurricane Sandy, Superstorm Sandy, the tide gates failed. Has the town actually made the necessary repairs so that we can rely on the tide gates?
So what the town has done, which is the first step, which was really important, is we've done an inventory of all of our tide gates and all of our flapper gates and everything to understand.
And we found some that we didn't know.
There were 6 we couldn't even find because they were buried, because we had not maintained them. So what we're now doing is taking all of those, and there's, I think, 26 total across the whole town. And we've put a prioritization of which ones need immediate repair, which ones will need repair in a 3 to 5 year period, and whatnot. So there's now at least a master plan to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to make sure that our tide gates are in working order, are functioning the way they should. And we have budget right now for the Riverside Drive tide gate, and I believe the railroad tide gate, we're looking to do that as well. That's the one over near Pine Creek. So we are starting the process of improving the ones that right now are in a place where they desperately need to be repaired and or increase capacity. A lot of times we just need to open up more pipes to allow more water flow. So we're putting in place the right size for what we need to protect our marshes, protect our area. The other thing we've looked at is the underpass study, which is what Jim had mentioned before. We have 4 key underpasses, which are key evacuation routes. So as the water comes in here and people need to leave, they can't get underneath these underpasses. So now there are, as I said, there's one overpass that goes across the train tracks there. And I think there's one over here where you can go around. But we looked at sort of what happens, if you've got an underpass that floods, you can't drive through that. Next slide, please. So the study looked at some low-cost adaptations, which are these warning gates, all the way up to a high-cost option, which would be to widen the underpass, add bike lanes, improve the drainage, add permeable pavement, add sort of detention basins and stuff. Those are more the low cost. So we've got a range of options to look at, and now we just have to decide which one makes the most sense to fund. And it may be as simple as just putting a warning gate from cost benefit.
But it has some significant costs because most of them have rail lines going through them.
Well, these are the underpasses.
Yeah.
So this would be before as you were going, the warning gate would be right here. So as the railroad track goes across here.
But in order to kind of, with rising sea level, they're impassable. I don't care what you do with that.
Yeah.
They're impassable unless you raise the tracks and the elevation.
Yeah.
And again, that $25 million budget line it's an incredible challenge. And I think part of it and why this program is so important, we have an increasing population growth south of the Post Road. And there is no real evacuation path and the economics of people's personal property is very much in play here. And so the erosion, the floodgates, the plantings and the initiatives, the soil erosion, these are all critical elements that we have to make an infrastructure investment, or otherwise taxpayers and property owners run the risk of losing some of their biggest investments
Yeah.
and their homes.
Exactly, exactly. And then one other example I'll just quickly do, and then we'll pass it on to the next person. If you could, next slide, please. So this is showing the flooding on the coastline. It's a similar thing. You've got Pasco Hill, and then this is where all the flooding is at various storm levels. Next slide. We looked at the Ash Creek area, and there's roughly 400 houses that are at risk from water coming in at various places. Next slide, please. And we did a study to see where the low points are, and there's 4 sort of low points here that we would need to look at mitigating.
Along like Riverside.
Yeah,
That whole-
Riverside Drive.
right.
So there's a couple different ways you can approach it. Next slide, please. One is that you can actually raise Trinity Road, which is good, because that would now be an evacuation route. It would help allow people to get out, which is great. And it would protect all of these homes, but it would not, it would leave all those at risk, because obviously now your road is raised here, and these are still gonna get inundated. Next slide, please. Or you could raise the berm. There's an existing berm that goes up along, past the Maria, it goes through the open space. You can kind of walk along it, there's a pathway through the open space, so, which is actually goes there, that's the open space. So we could raise that berm and raise the road and basically protect all those areas too, in more of a nature-based solution, which might be the way to go. So these are all the things that.
Are these being considered now in the town level,
These
or is
will
it
be
part of the
looked at.
master plan that
These will be looked at
549 million that you're talking
No,
about?
no, these are the new 2024 master plan that we
Oh.
are getting a budget for. So we'll be looking at these kinds of things. These are studies that we have done historically. So we will be looking at all aspects of Fairfield, the riverine as well as the downtown, as well as the coastal, and looking at various options for mitigation, and then evaluating the costs, because at the end of the day, the taxpayer is gonna be paying for these, and we have to decide, is it worth doing? Or do we do a cheaper version that does, that at least gets you from a safety evacuation standpoint?
What was the Fairfield Beach study I saw was on hold? Fairfield Beach Road study, it's on hold for the,
Oh, well, there was actually so we actually had the town looking at the elevations of Fairfield Beach Road with the idea that we could raise Fairfield Beach Road. And right now, we don't have the budget for that, but hopefully that'll be one of the things that we could put into this new 2024 master plan. Yes?
It seems like prioritizing natural solutions is important for the town at least. Are there plans to try and increase spending for renovation or stock development on the coastline?
When you say renovation of the coastline, I mean,
Restoration,
yeah, I mean, our problem is that we've built right up to the coastline. We don't have that lovely sandy beach with the marshes that Rob had shown you. We've got sandy beach and house. And so the options that we have are to raise houses, in which case the water would go under, and then when the tide went down, the water would go back. But, over time, as sea level goes up, as Gail had mentioned, you're not gonna be able to drive to your house at high tide. You can drive at low tide, but, that's gonna impact real estate.
all the days.
So one of the things we are looking at is mitigating the wave action. We had a study originally planned that would look at adding kind of a nature-based hybrid offshore breakwaters that would maybe be planted with oyster reefs and stuff, and it would do the same thing that a mangrove swamp would do, which would break the energy.
Which
of the
are
waves.
some of the recommendations by the Audubon of Connecticut.
Yeah, it would break the energy of the waves, and at least mitigate some level of the erosion, and hopefully less damage to some of the houses. But those are expensive. They're not cheap.
So I just add to that, there is another strategy that we looked at in Madison, Connecticut, Guilford, where you basically take a look at where you have areas that can be utilized as nature-based solutions that are in private hands. And so in theory, that individual could build on that property. But we asked them to take an easement on that property, not to build on it, and for that, we would make a payment to them to not do that. So it is a way to use funding to actually help people basically put their land in conservation, to help protect the shoreline of Connecticut. Gonna work a lot better east of New Haven than it is west of New Haven.
I think, do you have more, Becky?
No, I'm not.
Well, thank you very, very much. I think the key for us is, with the panelists that have come before, and we'll have more of the Q&A from the audience as well, is it's not a question of if, okay, from a standpoint of rising sea level and the profound impact that we're articulating in people's personal property and economic dangers and the ecological challenges that we have. It's not an issue of if, it's when. And I think we have to make that commitment for an infrastructure plan that accommodates and understands this. This is why, for me, this program is so important, is it's not an if, it's when. And I think we have an important responsibility to be able to lead in that initiative. It's gonna come at an economic cost, and I wanna compliment Governor Lamont that this year he had proposed Senate Bill number 11, which looked at a comprehensive plan on coastal resiliency. And one of the challenges we had, and I hope that he considers input from many of the collaborators and supporters to not only have DEEP be the determining decision maker, but to engage DEEP with advocacy groups, circa, community leaders. That was one of the advocacies I proposed to the governor is you can't make and create a resiliency plan without input from the very entities that are going to be impacted. Local input is critical in understanding some of the infrastructure as well as geological impact and history. We have a panel of people here from Gail and Becky that articulated the real nuances of our community. So Senate Bill 11 is a bill that I strongly supported, but I hope that we make it better by inputting local input and collaboration with scientific outsiders to be able to offer input instead of government bureaucracy in some cases. So we had a fantastic presentation by a third grader. I'm going to lead into having two young youth sustainability student leaders, high school seniors, and I'm going to say Saria Mothakuri and Scout Oranzo-Roots. So come on up. They've been so patient, and I know they practiced all this. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Saraya. I'm a graduating senior at Fairfield Ward High School, and next fall I will be attending UConn, where I'll be majoring in biology. I have done a lot of advocacy for the environment through going up to the Capitol and also speaking at the Capitol. I went to a public hearing where I spoke about a Senate bill about food waste. It was actually co-sponsored by a senator. This experience really allowed me to see how the legislative process in action, where I learned how a bill gets passed, not just my EP Gov class. It was really interesting to see it in person. In addition, this experience also taught me that it's really important to be engaged as a citizen in the government and what happens because we're living it.
My name is Scout. I'm also a graduating senior at Fairfield Ward High School. I will be attending NYU in the fall, where I'll be majoring in photography. I've advocated for the environment by going to the Capitol with Mary and Straya. But
We testified together.
yeah. Also through my photography, and I think that photos can be like a powerful way to convey messages and also to make change.
Also, we want to talk about what we're talking about coastal resilience and hurricanes. We just wanted to bring up how each year during hurricane season, the storms are just getting worse and worse, and the flooding is really bad, and it's causing a lot of damage to properties. And this is a really big issue, and a solution that we could possibly implement in Fairfield is by having bioswales. Bioswales are linear vegetated ditches which allow for collection, conveyance, filtration, and infiltration of stormwater. And this is proven to work because in the city of New Haven, they currently have 200 bioswales, and it has greatly reduced their flooding. And something that we can do in Fairfield, possibly, is by having these to help with their flooding. Yeah.
Yeah. Scout, you want to add anything else? I want to acknowledge, and Scout brought up a very good point in regards to photography. I mean, we're advocating in so many different ways, but I want to acknowledge Mr. Jeffrey Stedman, who took these aerial shots, and as Scout said, photography shares some of the visuals that we have and the beauty that we have and the privilege of living in our community. And you have young, sustainable leaders from the 3rd grade on up that have made their voices heard. And I think that is one of the powers that we have in a democracy, is your engagement and your learning and your sharing of why this is important to you. Because part of our responsibility as a legislator is to be able to preserve and sustain the environment and our natural habitats. So younger generations from 3rd grade to those unborn and to high school seniors about to embark on a new career and life, that you can come back to our coastline and be able to enjoy the natural treasure that we are so lucky to have. So we have an important responsibility to preserve it and to protect it. So thank you both for being advocates. Very well done. I'm so proud of these young people, because sometimes they remind us that there's an incredible can-do. I'll segue a little bit in regards to the pride and the remarkable impact that young people can have. We just passed out a bill that recognized lollipop as the state candy. Now, people would say, what does that have to do? It reinforces that these were a bunch of 3rd graders at the Dwight School that believe that they can make a difference. And they did the research, as these young people have done, and they've advocated in letting their legislators know. They come up to Hartford, they let their voice be heard, and lo and behold, 3.5 years later, they got the bill passed. Now we gotta get the governor to sign it, but it shows beyond about the bill. And we wanna feature the young people here today because it is a reinforcement that everyone can have a voice in making a difference, and that you can make a difference. And if you put your voice to it, and your voice does matter. So I want to acknowledge the young people and our terrific 3rd grader who did a great job. So now we have looked at resiliency. We have looked at not an if, but when. And we're trying to prepare to the best that we can to prevent damages through the resiliency and the floodgates and the marshes. But nevertheless, Sandy wasn't even a hurricane. And we're grateful that the wind shifted and it was low tide. Can you imagine if the circumstances were different? And we had a category 3, and the tide is high, and the wind shifted in the wrong way. The bottom line is, we can prepare to the best of our ability, but Mother Nature is such a force that sometimes we just can't predict what happens. So when emergencies occur, we have tremendous people in our communities that is part of the Community Emergency Response Team. It's CERT, the acronyms, but we also have a tremendous team of law enforcement and firefighting and emergency services professional that's led by our fire chief, Dennis McCarthy. We have the president right now, wearing all the burden of CERT, is Cindy O'Neill Vitale, and CERT is an incredible organization of community volunteers that are there for people in need. They complement our law enforcement and public safety officials, but they're the people that are out there. I remember working with one, Norma Peterson, and many other CERT officials in Sandy, in which we were housing people at Fairfield Ludlow High School. And as we're coming in today, Ludlow lost its power, and they didn't have a backup generation. And these are things that we learned, but nevertheless, we housed people, we fed them, we kept them safe and warm in the October months. Bottom line, I wanted to introduce Cindy and Chief McCarthy for them to be able to share what CERT and emergency services, but also some of the preparations that we can prepare for should that storm occur that we are not prepared for. For that, perfect storm, so to speak. So please, come on up, Chief Bucky. I'll bring the back. No, we'll bring the back. All right.
Well, it's nice to see everybody out tonight. Chief McCarthy is our emergency manager director, and CERT works under his leadership. Okay, so CERT does not just run out and do the things that we do without the guidance and direction of our emergency management team. So I think that's a really important thing for us to be able to talk about. So some interesting things were discussed tonight. I actually live on Hillcrest Road, just at the viaduct of Round Hill Road. And I'm very familiar with the flooding of it, because a lot of times now, I can't even get out of my street or into my street. The water has moved up that much higher. And there's been work done on the drainage systems there, and it can, for the small community in my neighborhood, we often worry, if we can't get in or out, what are we gonna do? So I'm anxious for these plans to move forward, because it personally affects me. So CERT, Community Emergency Response Team, we are really here to talk to you tonight about what you can do to prepare yourself, your family, your neighbors, and then support your community. So while we're talking about resiliency and how we get there, if we don't talk about preparedness, the resiliency doesn't matter. All right, so if we're not prepared for these emergencies, we'll have a hard time compensating when they do happen. I don't know if I have a clicker here or not. So what does resiliency mean? All right, I just said we can't really talk about resiliency without preparedness. Did we miss one? There we go. Preparedness is something that we do. All right, FEMA describes it as a continuous cycle of planning, organizing, training, equipping, exercising, evaluating, and taking corrective action. We do this every single day of our lives. We just don't always realize we do it. But in terms of emergency preparedness, these are the actions that we want to be taking. It's something we work on and we plan for, and you can see a couple photographs where annually we do our inventory and check our equipment and make sure it's ready to be deployed if we need it, fix any leaks that might be happening. So resiliency is something that we are in a situation, all right? How prepared are we to navigate the events that just happened? So during Hurricane Sandy, when we lost power, I was out of power for about 2 weeks, you know? My family was prepared to navigate that, but not everybody was. And not everybody can be. You know, there were challenges with families or individuals who were relying on electricity because they needed oxygen, right? And they can't go hours without it. So what are we doing as a community to try and address those needs of preparedness? But what are you doing in your own home to make sure you can navigate the situations that are upon us? I think when you were talking about where we are in years of storms, oh my gosh, what if we had all of those happen this year? That would be frightening, right? But we're so close. One's this year, one's next year, one's, you know, a few years from now. So, you know, as planners, sometimes we have to think about the unthinkable and think about how we kind of move forward with that. Sorry. Well, I think about that stuff.
Yeah, we all do.
Again, resilience is something that we are in a situation. How prepared are you? And it's just not about packing your toolbox or having your go bag. How resilient are you as an individual? What are you doing to make sure you're going to be able to get through these situations for yourself, for your family, for your neighbors, and then for your community? Did I jump ahead? All right, so when we talk about disasters, we've got natural disasters and man-made disasters, right? Natural disasters, pretty obvious: hurricanes, floods, blizzards, tornadoes, fires, that sort of thing. Earthquakes, we get to add that to our list now. And then man-made disasters: war, pollution, explosions, nuclear accidents, transportation
accidents. We just had that, right? And I think it was a pretty awesome show of resiliency that our state was able to come together and get 95 opened in such a short amount of time. But for the folks who were right in that community, that was a challenge for them. What happened to our roadways, right? Everybody got off 95 and were coming through towns and side roads. So that definitely took a little bit of, that created a little bit of pressure. How did we get kids to schools? There were kids on school buses, either waiting to be picked up or stuck on a bus. So because we've got great emergency managers and planners and thinkers, we were able to navigate through, not me, sir, but as a community, the leaders within the community. I loved that I could get on 95 with no traffic going northbound. So, just saying. So we want to be cognizant of that. FEMA tells us in a lot of their literature that you need to be a yo-yo for 72 hours. You're on your own for 72 hours, so that you should plan to have your medication, to have enough water, to have food, to keep your family warm, to take care of yourself for 72 hours. I'm saying I want you to think about 14 days, minimum. That's not a FEMA thing, that's a Cindy thing. But we've had enough events that have happened in most of our recent memory where 3 days wasn't enough supply for you to have on hand to be able to take care of those around you. I did work the shelter during Superstorm Sandy with Norma, and we were there for 7 days. Not only did we have 300 people at the shelter, we had 56 pets in the shelter as well, including lizards and snakes. We had a child that was a month old, and we had a elderly woman who was 101. So we passed, a tremendous age group of folks that we had to try and manage. And that was an incredibly stressful time for our community. Not a lot of information we were able to get about what was happening in the neighborhoods that were flooded and people were leaving. So those are all things that we need to consider in our planning process, right? So I'm saying to you, consider a 14-day supply to keep yourself safe. And that's going to be different for everybody. What kinds of medications are you on? Do you need refrigeration? Do you have gas in your car? My pet peeve. My family leaves it on empty. I don't like it below 3/4 of a tank. So keep those things.
And you prepare bag?
This is an example of I call it a toolkit, but most of us know it as a go bag. What's in your go bag, all right? And how are you going to be ready to go? I'm not going to spend time on this, but these are 4 things that we always have to consider when we're talking about preparedness and resiliency. And we've talked about them tonight with our other presenters, but we have to talk about mitigation, preparedness, those are the actions we do. How to respond to an event that happens, and then what's our recovery? So we should be thinking about our recovery before the event is happening so that we're prepared, all right, being proactive, not reactive. So again, just preparedness is something we do, resilience is something we are in any situation. So the more prepared we are, the better we're going to be able to physically, mentally, and emotionally get through a very challenging situation. Chief, is there anything you want to add at this point? I've got a couple more things to go through.
Okay.
I just didn't know if I skipped over anything. All right, so really quickly, I know we're talking about hurricanes and the water season, but Friday, April 5th, 10:30, what happened in the morning? How many of you felt it? Holy cow, I've never been in an earthquake before. It scared me to death. Where I was located, the building I was in was a very old building, and all the windows started rattling, large rumble, actually felt the floor move. And I thought there's been a gas explosion nearby underground. And all the car alarms went off. So that was a little startling, and I realized, pretty quickly that it was an earthquake, and that was kind of scary. But it made me think about how quickly disaster can hit us. If you had to run out of your house, would you be able to leave and have the necessities you need to sustain yourself at that moment? And just by comparison, January 1st of 2024, Japan had an earthquake. It was 7.5 on the Richter scale, on the magnitude. Japan's a little, where it hits a little larger than Fairfield, just under 80,000 residents, 245 fatalities, 3 people are still missing, 1,300 were injured, and just under 13,000 people needed to be housed in evacuation shelters. All right, those are large shelters to be managing these people. Today, there are still 6,400 residents without a place to live, and Japan is expecting to have 5,000 temporary housing shelters built by the end of June. That's 6 months since they've been displaced. So that's a little alarming, and one of the things that I think about, I know I think about weird things in the middle of the night, and how do we prepare for something like that? So when the ground shook, I went, oh my gosh, think about what's going on. Houston, last week, what happened in Houston? That wasn't even a hurricane. It was a huge storm that came through and destroyed downtown Houston. Today, they had 900,000 homes without power. Today, it's 600,000. You know how hot it is in Houston right now? It's between 90 and 100 degrees. Their cooling centers, I did look it up today. Many of them are open. They're open for 8 hours. That means for 15 hours a day, people have to figure out how they're going to get by, right? So we're seeing these crazy rainstorms come through. We don't need a hurricane to create a disaster for us, right? So we should be thinking about how we prepare ourselves and our families to get through this. What's in your toolkit? What's in your car? Is it full of gas? Do you have cash in your pocket? Right? When the power goes out, you won't be able to pump gas, and you won't be able to get cash out of an ATM.
And your phone can't be charged.
Your
Oh
phone
no.
can be charged, yeah. So what are our immediate needs? First aid, obviously. If you are injured and hurt, you need first aid right away. We need shelter, all right? The next thing we need is shelter, all right? We want to have water, okay? We need things to keep us warm if we're soaking wet. Even if it's warm outside, as the evening sets in and the temperature is cool, right? People can become susceptible to hypothermia. Our very young and our senior population is more at risk with that type of concern. We need ways to communicate. How are you communicating with your family? Anybody here a ham radio operator, technician? Oh, Norma, you are? I am too. But two-way radios, right? That may be how you will communicate. And then you're gonna need food, all right? So why does that order matter? Well, in general, okay, we can survive for 3 minutes without breathing, okay? We need oxygen, okay? We can survive 3 hours without a shelter if we're in harsh conditions, right? We can survive 3 days without water as long as we have shelter. And we can survive 3 weeks without food as long as we have water and shelter. Right? So we want to make sure we're covering those bases and understanding the things that are important to our survival versus the things that we're comfortable with, right? Okay, you can go ahead. All right, you've got in your handout, we provided a great starting point, a jumping off point of the things that should be in your toolbox. All right, one of the things that really, you don't see a lot of information in there is, and this again will be different for everybody, but having cash when there's an emergency. Who uses cash anymore? Everything's tap to pay, right? But when everything fails and there is no electricity, you're not gonna be able to swipe your ATM card or tap it on the machine. So having cash that's appropriate for you would be important, all right? Making sure you have financial documents. All right, so you can validate that this is your account, this is where your money's located, that you do have insurance, those types of things. So you should have a safety box to keep really important information like that. Again, it's in your handout, so it's a starting point. There is more, certainly a lot more out there for you. Again, continuation of the list. Having access to things that you need immediately is the difference between surviving, being prepared, being resilient, and not knowing what to do, right? So again, keep that in mind.
And you pack that into like a duffel bag that could travel.
Yep, it's different for everybody, yes, but this would be something you wanna go. I do wanna point out that pets are a really important part of survival, and it's a really important part, an important feature that a lot of families will not leave their home if they can't take their pets. So by law now, pets are required to be housed in shelters, all right? But when you're thinking about the foods that you might need to pack in a go bag, make sure you don't forget about your pets. Pack your pet food, pack your pet vitamins. Take your vaccination records for your pets so that you can prove they've had a rabies shot. So you get access to that shelter. Because that would be really unfortunate to have all of your documentation but nothing for your pet. And that is a concern and it's come up before. And so I just want to close. This is our CERT team. We do not just Fairfield. We have several teams within the Fairfield County, but we do train, we practice, we get together to coordinate events and mutual aid. And my question back to you is what's in your bag? And are you ready today? Because if you wait till 72 hours before the storm, you're not going to be prepared. Yeah, you might be able to find a battery or two, but you're not going to have the things you need in your toolkit to be resilient.
They'll be run on the stores.
And when we are resilient as individuals, we're even more resilient as a community. And that is what makes a big difference.
Thank you, Cindy. I want to bring on Chief McCarthy to be able to describe a little bit more of the emergency, management and the role. And I think people need to know that you're out there and there's a command center that takes in all the information, because communications is critical, and getting the communications to power companies, to our first responders is critical. What advice do you give to those that are on a yo-yo that looks to get help? And thank you for your service.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing everybody together. From the emergency management's perspective, we have a very robust system in the town of Fairfield, and we are activating at the first notion that an emergency might impact the town of Fairfield. So 5 days in advance of a hurricane, we are activating our plan so that we can start to anticipate some of the impacts as the reliability of the forecast improves. And as we have all seen and experienced, that a hurricane is forecast and it takes a right-hand turn and goes up the seaboard and doesn't affect us at all. We are still reacting to that in the early days to make sure that if instead of a right-hand turn, it takes a left-hand turn, we are starting to bring our team together to respond to protect the community. So we have a 96-hour plan that covers all of town government and our nonprofits and our business partners, so that each day, as the forecast continues to show impacts in Fairfield, we invest more time and energy and town's tax dollars to address the emergency, so that if it does impact us, we're ready for it when it arrives. So our team will meet in person on Monday morning for a Saturday landfalling hurricane, and then by Wednesday we're meeting twice a day. We're starting to send out information to the community and developing and bringing in more resources and hiring staff, canceling vacations, so that we're ready to go. It's a very good system, and everybody participates from the IT department to the police, DPW, fire department, first selectman's office. And as you mentioned, the utilities embed themselves in our emergency operations center, which is the classroom at police headquarters, so that obviously one of the biggest impacts in Fairfield and most of our very lush green communities as a result of tree damage is power outages. And Cindy mentioned it could be days and weeks that we're without power. So we want to make sure that we are communicating well, prioritizing with our utility partners to get that power back on as quickly as possible. So that's what we're doing. And what I encourage all of you to do is take the same kind of process that we have developed a 96-hour plan for residents and for businesses. It's on the Town of Fairfield storm page on the town's website, so that if there is a forecasted storm that's coming our way, hopefully we'll have reviewed that plan in advance, but each day do a little bit more. You know that on day 5 they're going to say, or day 4 they're going to say, take all of the lawn furniture in from the porch, or things that can be blown around during a storm, or the checklist that Cindy talked about. Go to the store and get all of those resources that you might need if you're going to lose power, lose refrigeration. So you have those resources, but that's all in the plan, and it's laid out in a logical fashion so you're not spending a lot of money on a storm that may not come. You're increasing your preparedness each day as the threat becomes larger. So the town is prepared, but if you're not prepared, you become an emergency. So we encourage all of you to do that, and also to register for the Town of Fairfield Alert. Also on the town webpage, the Fairfield Alert used to be called Code Red, so you can get emergency messages from us. We all know that if we watch the New York media, or any media, the worst case scenario will be broadcast. And it may be the worst case scenario, but it may not be for here. It may be in New York, it may be in Rhode Island. But we want you to receive information specifically for the town of Fairfield from the emergency management team. The way to do that is to register to receive those alerts directly from the town through the Fairfield Alert system, and we will provide you the best information that we have so you can make appropriate, intelligent decisions for your own safety and the safety of your family.
That's it. Thank you, Chief. Having been a state leader in Sandy and Irene and ISIS, I can't say that name, I'm incredibly grateful for our first responders and CERT. And most important of all, the coming together of our community. There are people that are looking out for their neighbors and seniors. And I know from our first responders having a forklift driving through the water to persuade some of our seniors that didn't want to leave their pets, that didn't want to leave their homes, to be able to take them to safety. I think one of the parts where I think CERT and our first responders and emergency management is so critical when we talk about hurricanes and coastal resiliency. I think Cindy hit it right on the dot here. It's resilience. And the resilience encompasses communities coming together, neighbors helping each other and looking out for each other, but it's also the resilience in understanding the challenges that we have and not putting our head in the sand, and to really understand that it's not an if, it's when, and that we have to make the necessary infrastructure as well as policy changes in order to be sure that we protect people's lives and public safety first and foremost, but also the economics of people's home and property and businesses. So I think for me, I'm so grateful for this panel because we all learn from each other. And I want to thank the audience for having to listen to all of us on this. But I'm going to open it up, and I want to thank CERT and Chief McCarthy again and our young leaders. But I'm happy to answer any questions from the audience that wants to go to our panel. You can just kind of raise your hand or address any of the questions, and I'll repeat it because we don't have a microphone set up for you. And we'll let the panelists address any of the questions you may have. Any questions from the audience? I know you have your hand up, sir.
I have a question.
poles, the posts with the flood, warning, or the flood heights on them. Like for Hurricane Sandy was like at 9.5 feet on that. So you were saying that's only 4 feet, that was only like 3.5 feet higher? Because at the base of it, it says it's like 6 feet.
So I'll repeat your question. You talked about the evacuation and the height of these poles that I thought was always interesting as well. And you're saying it's 6 feet or 9 feet.
Well, in other words, Hurricane Sandy, if you look at where the mark, it was between 9.5 and 10 feet on that. Like on Fairfield Beach Road, there was one, and you could see where the water had come in. And I was relating to her fact that she said the storm hit at low tide.
Thank God.
But the thing is that the flood level.
Yeah,
was,
the inundation level.
the inundation level was 9.5 feet. So
Yeah, well, that's not what Noah said, but, you know.
that's
Maybe Becky has some more specific information.
well, when we evacuated to that, they had said that they were expecting a surge of 11 to 14 feet, so we got off easy. But that was still, I mean, I've lived here since 1986. We had a perfect storm. We got here just before, right after Gloria. We had a perfect storm. My wife was stuck, and they wanted to take her and my son out in a payloader to evacuate. And then we dealt with Irene and Sandy. But when we listen to this, there's so much of this that is so far beyond what we can control. Okay, when you say, well, I mean, about sea level rise and all that, I mean.
Can I bring the microphone to you?
I wasn't trying to give a speech.
No, you know what? We want you to be heard. Here. Do all this. Go ahead. All yours.
Oh, okay.
You can hold on to it. Go ahead.
But with the sea level rise and everything that's, you have a real helpless feeling. And, you know, my wife and I, we didn't raise our house after the last storm, or the Sandy. We got through it we had damage, but what, you know, it's just hard. I guess, let me bring up back a question, because now we're going through with the Penfield remediation, quote unquote remediation, which nobody in my mind has ever answered the question to me, why do we need to lower the grade? The last nor'easter that came through, my neighbor's swimming pool was about 6 feet, was underwater. Because the sound came in from the pavilion. What steps are we looking at to give us some resiliency behind Penfield Pavilion?
Right, can you speak to that?
Panel's experts, go ahead. Thank you.
So I can speak specifically to Penfield and
Thank you.
why we needed to.
Anybody else?
The reason we were asked to reduce the grade was FEMA basically looked at a series of photographs dating back through the years, 30s, 40s, 50s, where the grade, what they're saying, the grade, and actually some of those photos were supplied by the town of Fairfield.
Yeah.
The grade was between 8 and 9 feet under Penfield.
But the rest of the beach is now
So
11 to 14 feet.
Yeah,
because of
well,
it.
Rickards Beach comes in at a high ground, that's about 13 to 15 feet, and then you've got your Jackie Durrell Pavilion, which is also around 15 feet, in between Penfield, which is now a bowl of 8 feet. But the reason it became higher, it got up to about 11 feet of elevation, because we did, according to DEEP and FEMA, we built an illegal bulkhead, which allowed the sand to accrete up to 11 feet.
But
And so they're
there's
saying we never should have done that.
But there's a crease along the entire, if you go from Jack Durrell Pavilion, you go all the way up through Jennings Beach.
Well, Jennings Beach is a proper dune. I mean, Jennings Beach is a planted dune, and that's.
Well, we
around
have
15
planted
feet.
dune at Penfield too, we have planted dune. right?
You have it at Rickards comes over.
Right. But now what they've done by insisting on us doing that is they've created what is essentially like if you watch a stream and you watch it constricted, what happens? The water accelerates through it. So what they've done is they're setting up a serious issue for the immediate neighborhood.
And I will say that, you know, as part of the 2024 townwide resilience plan, we will be looking at solutions to.
Yeah, and you sent me an email.
And I appreciate that you, in your words and just the way you articulated that, that's what I want to capture it. A tremendous sense of helplessness that you're at the whim, and part of what we're trying to do tonight is to give you the information,
Right.
and to be able to have resources. That packet has incredible amounts of information, but also some of the science facts that kind of help you understand what is the evolution that's happening, but also resources, and all the other necessary information. We want to get rid of that sense of helplessness.
Right. Well,
We all feel that way with Mother Nature in its force, but nevertheless, my hope and desire is we can be proactive. We can work together to find better solutions, because resilience, I love the word, is that we can make the effort. And so I really do
yeah, I mean,
appreciate
I've
your
heard
sentiment.
steps to be taken to try to, I mean, look, if you get hit by a hurricane like 1938 or something like that, you're a host. I mean, you're
It's going over.
you're a host. I mean, we all know, we all understand that if we live here, you know, we understand that that can happen. You know, but what you're also looking at is, you know, what I was referring to is the fact that there are lesser storms, like the nor'easter we just had, that just by excavating under the pavilion, the water came in.
Mhm.
Okay, so, you know, I mean, we have to accept the fact that there may be more serious storms, but we also need to try to live day to day, and in some of these lesser storms, it'd be nice if we're not inundated.
Well, the master plan is critical, and the resiliency that's going on at Ash Creek, they're all elemental. What the Audubon is doing in regards to the what do you call it? I think it's
Shoreline or?
yeah, the ball, and obviously Circa doing what they do, and our young people who are gonna come up and make a commitment to that. So thank you, we're gonna keep you updated.
I just wanna comment just quickly, on the margin, some of these small things can help in those more frequent storms, right? Public awareness of the fact that they're happening more frequently, you clearly understand that, I think more people need to understand.
Correct.
These storms, not when, if, are happening more and
Yeah.
more frequently, and with greater and greater intensity.
Yeah. Mary, and then back there, okay? Thank you.
Well, you mentioned the Senate Bill 11, and you didn't say whether it passed or not, and if not, then when are we
It did not pass. We passed it, no, it did not pass, and Senate, and House Bill 5004, which was a major climate change initiative, laden with incentives to kind of change your behavior pattern. That was a comprehensive bill, that did not pass either. I think I've been public and made a commitment that both of those bills are important to address the when, not the ifs, and reduction of CO2 and preventive measures. I think it's a combination of both. So it continues to be a work in progress. But meanwhile, we shouldn't be standing still and you know, saying it didn't pass. I think the young people and these experts here that have been grassroots and doing what they're doing, they're not waiting for sometimes what Hartford does. We should work with you, we should make some leadership initiatives like I've tried, but nevertheless, they're not waiting, because there's too much at risk when you're looking at people's homes and people's businesses. So, and I know that you've been a tremendous advocate in being the support of these young leaders as well. So thank you, Mary. I'm gonna bring that over to, let's see.
Well, that's okay. Can I speak loud enough?
Well, you know what, here. We can get to you.
Is that a good now? Is that a good now?
Yeah, and this, for our purposes, it won't project.
Yep, come on up. You notice how he let you take the lead on
Yeah,
that?
I
All right,
noticed
here we go.
How he handed off.
He's smart.
I understand so well, and Becky knows me very well, so she knows that I understand the, what's going to happen, and it's going to happen, I get it, and I get that, you know, that the water's rising, temperatures, the whole environmental impact. What makes me feel more vulnerable is actually understanding that and sitting and watching, because I live on Fairfield Beach, and wondering, what can I do as an individual homeowner to help create a better environment, to stop the erosion, to create sustainability? What can I do under the state law? What am I allowed to do? What kind of living barrier can I plant? I mean, and if I do it and I'm alone, it's not gonna do the rest of the beach any good. So I find it very frustrating. I feel as though I am trying to put a foot forward and 2 feet go backwards. And I have to say, I dealt with deep for 9 years. And it's a very frustrating.
Remember I said about SB 11?
Yes, it's a very frustrating feeling, and if we don't get some cooperation and more input with deep, I'm gonna feel even more frustrated.
And that's what I said about Senate Bill 11, and I've said that to the governor's
But what
office.
can I do as an individual?
Well, I think that's a perfect segue, if I may, in asking the panelists, I want to respect people's time, for each of you to kind of follow up and answer her question and give certain examples of what you can do. I think I'll lead by saying nature-based solutions are the path to go, and initiatives that you can undertake. And I know that seawalls is always the big question in which deep is, but we're looking at more constructive, nature-based solutions that could be little alleviation. It's not going to counter the perfect storm, but it is those that kind of frequent storms that become a threat to your property and your home that we can do. So for each of the panelists, we're gonna go, and it'll be a closing kind of summarization. What can we do with a point or two that we can give to homeowners like here? And not just the people that are here, because this is being broadcasted, thank you to CTN, Connecticut's network, so it's gonna be brought not only in coastal communities, but communities impacted by climate storms that flood our riverways and resiliency protection. But ultimately, what can we do as a broader community and making a big difference, if I may? Thank you very much for your question.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Because I wasn't nervous until you spoke. And I'm well aware of all the climate change and how, you know, carbon footprint and the warming of the world. But it just seems to me that we talk about evacuation, and if there's only one way to get past, you know, the underpass or the railroad tracks, it seems to me that that's a queuing problem. That's gonna be a big issue, and as far as the town, you know, it just seems like an easy solution. I say easy, I mean,
Well, it's costly to change infrastructure, but nevertheless,
Well,
Chief
something
McCarthy.
should be able to go an overpass shouldn't be that complicated.
Oh, it's very expensive. Let's go through and answer her question in regards to many homeowners. What can they do to have some degree of input and ultimately, we as elected officials and public officials need to be accountable and listen to you. And that's part of, for me, why this program, for me, has been an ongoing basis. Because it's, again, I repeat myself often, as my wife would say, it's not if, it's when. And for those people that live in the communities that are impacted, you love what you have, you love your home, you love what magic we have in living in a coastal community. But nevertheless, the risk is there, and how can we help? That's the objective. So, to our great panelists, we'll start with Jim O'Connor.
So you've taken the first step, I think, by showing up tonight. It's expressing support for political leaders who are taking these issues seriously and trying to take steps. Secondly, the simplest thing you can do by yourself is to try and reduce CO2 emissions. That will help in the long run. In the short run, you know, if you live in an area which is vulnerable to flooding, then you can take action around your own property. You're sort of in charge of that, and you'll save probably, you know, if you save money in the long term, if you perhaps elevate your house or take other resilience measures, which may involve simply changing where your heating and cooling facilities are. And every single site is different, so it's hard to make generalizations, but there are things you can do on your own property. But the most important thing, I think, for a community is to participate in these planning processes that we have underway across the state. And you know, Becky mentioned one that's coming up in Newtown. And that's where important decisions and opinions can be made. Some properties are going to be easier and cheaper to protect than others, and some roads are going to be easier and cheaper to raise, and decisions like that are going to have costs, both locally and at the state level. So you may get cost sharing, but all these things are again very site specific, and you've got to engage and bring your perspectives to those meetings in order for them to be effective, because without your participation, you can't expect leadership to understand what you care about and how much you're willing to spend.
And this is why we're having this kind of an extra panel.
That's why I said this is the most important thing.
Yep. Rob?
So my answer is to take a look at your own ecosystem. You live in an ecosystem. It impacts you, you impact it. And I will go along with what Jim O'Donnell said, which is once you understand your ecosystem, you'll know what you need to do with your neighbors versus with yourself versus with the county versus with the state. I mean, take a look at what might impact you, how you might be impacted, and come up with a plan of what you need to do, who else you need to engage to protect your property. People do it all the time. Homeowners associations up and down the coastline look at these issues. They deal with wastewater issues, they deal with water issues. They should be dealing with resilience issues. One of the things Senate Bill 11 does is it creates these areas where you can actually come up with a zone, basically a district. And in that district, you can apply for and obtain funding. That's an expansion of some current law. There's more to be done. My sense is the best place to start is with your own self and then with your community, taking a look at those discussions and engaging as a group. I'll ask the senator this question. A group of individuals in his district coming to him with a request for assistance is going to be bigger than just one individual. So that's the other thing I would think.
Rob, that's a perfect segue to Becky, who, as I mentioned earlier, is not only on a town body in regards to the flood and erosion, but she's also on the board of the Fairfield Beach Residents Association. So you are not alone, and I want to compliment Carolyn Clement and the membership. They advocate for the community, but also this is an example. We've talked about native plantings in the surrounding areas to be able to do vegetation, so you're not alone. And the association has been an advocate. You've got great people that are advocating. So a little bit of a direct to you, Becky, but it is about a community coming together, caring about where you live.
So I would echo what's been said already in terms of some of the things that we can do. But I think there are other things, I won't reiterate the same ones, but I think there are other things we can do. First of all, I want to thank Tony for putting together this kind of a panel. I think it's important to be able to share this broadly, and thank you for publicizing this on the TV. But I think I also would ask Tony to help us open up some possibilities with DEEP, because I do feel personally that some of the DEEP restrictions are a little too strict, and I'll give you an example. We have bulkheads along Fairfield Beach Road. You used to be able to have them at 8 feet. They would allow the water not to flood onto the roads. Recently, all of the coastal area management plans now, DEEP has required them to be at about 6.5 feet, which means that we are getting regular flooding, which means that now you can't drive through that street. And that's something that DEEP has chosen to do, and we as a town
Unilaterally,
can't do
without
anything
any
about
input
that.
from.
So we need you.
Well, guess what? It's on my list now. Thank you very much, Becky.
Open doors to some of the things that with sea level rise, that's only going to get worse. And these are just basic common sense things. I'm not asking you to build huge walls.
But that,
I'm not asking you to build,
that previous height, it is not a environmental threat. It pre-existed, it's manageable,
Yeah,
it isn't a threat. Again, what I talked about is, Senate Bill 11 has a lot of really good ideas, and I've been supportive of it. One of the things that I've said repeatedly is, it needs to be able to have all impacted parties have input, not centralized control into deep. And we've already heard the frustrations of deep, well-intentioned, no doubt, but they're a organizational bureaucracy.
Can you
And
take legal steps against deep?
well, people have, but I think the key is legislative process.
I'm asking
So
legislators to help.
hopefully we can pass Senate Bill 11 with that kind. That's something I've been really focused in on. I would have voted for the bill, but nevertheless, I think that was one of the biggest determinant. The frustration that we all have listening to constituents, which is critical, of deep and their management style is not consistent with local perspective property owners that aren't looking to take shortcuts or take advantage of situations. They just want to do what's right and fair and environmentally correct as well.
I just have to stand up for one second. I worked at Keep for 25 years.
Well, they miss you.
And-
They miss you. Thank you very much.
And my point, I guess, is I do think you have to take advantage and try to work with them. I understand, absolutely. I was the liaison between them and the General Assembly, so I dealt with problems all the time back and forth. I do think it's important.
Rob, we miss you.
It's really important that from a local community that you reach out to the folks, and there are a number of folks in the coastal management area who will help you, but again, it's something where legislators have to be involved, because that give and take is really helpful to actually coming up with the best outcomes.
Correct. And for those that are watching in our community, please let me know your concerns. I want to be, and I have been advocating to be the voice to do what's right for coastal resiliency. And I want to remove that sense of helplessness for many of the people in the community. And that's why we're doing what we're doing right now. It is part of the outreach and the communications to say, share with your neighbors that we're here. Let us know what we can do to help. Yeah?
Okay, first thought that comes to mind is forget about beauty for your home, your landscape. Think about resiliency. I mean, if that's your key issue, okay? There are landscape designers that can build rain gardens, bioswales, and create an environment in your home that will help absorb floodwaters and maybe even create areas where, the floodwaters won't come in quite where you don't want it to.
Yeah, I'm thinking of some landscaping of high marshes.
Well, you
But
don't always
but
have,
that's part of the balance, right?
yeah, you don't always have a high marsh habitat, so the landscape design is so complex, I could never do it. I only have a PhD, so, I would hire somebody, because it's a really complex, area of knowledge, and, hire an expert to help you figure out how to make your piece of land more resilient, and then get a group of neighbors, maybe meet with the landscape designer, see what you could do in a whole, neighborhood that might create even more resiliency. You might be able to create like a mini area of resilience.
Thank you, Gail. Soraya, Scout's like, but talk about being a voice. Talk about your advocacy. Even though it was solid food waste that you advocated for, you all advocated for sustainability, for environmental advocacy, a whole array of bills. I enjoyed testifying with both of you. So please share with what your consideration, a younger generation, as you go off to school, and what do you think matters to you?
I would just say that if there's something that you want to happen, a change that you want to happen, like use your voice, because something like
Talk
you
your
said with
lips.
the lollipop.
Well,
Like,
That took 3.5 years.
it sure did. And you know what?
We still spoke
Those
about it.
three, those third graders, I will tell you, they will live a life that they know they can. And they can believe in the civics and their government. I think if there's nothing else, it is about lollipops. But the most powerful lesson I gained was these young people believe in the democratic political process. Trust me, there's a lot of disdain, and there's a lot of just kind of feeling as though they don't have a voice. And I'm telling you, if these third graders who are now sixth graders believe that they can, and they did, but the governor's got to sign it, it is part of the power that really engages and make people believe and to remove that sense of helplessness. Look, you can't beat Mother Nature if we got a perfect storm, but nevertheless, we've got great people around our community that want to help.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert, but like, I would just say like spreading the word, like, telling your friends. Like, I know I'm gonna tell all my friends, or I'm gonna tell my parents like everything you said, like making a bag. But yeah. Also like, I will take pictures. Like, I want to take pictures. Like, I think that's a good way to.
Absolutely. And as a result of Cindy last year, our family prepared a bag. Seriously, and the bag keeps getting bigger. But did you say that she scared you?
Just a little bit.
Okay. All right, you can close us off.
Then I did my job.
You did, but I'm still waiting for evacuation.
Well, if you're not prepared, you're never gonna have the evacuation route, right? There are,
I just have this vision of me going to the tracks.
yeah, but you could go up past Stop and Shop and go over that way too. I mean, there are options, right? But I hear what
They
you're saying.
have given, the
Right.
town and Chief McCarthy has raised the awareness, they know, and their plans, but I think it's early preparation and heed the warning. And even if it's a false storm, you know what, the only thing that you lose is preparation. The best thing that can happen is you can save your life and the pets and the people that you love. So, and my hat's off to CERT. They're fantastic people. They're out there. You know, I think if I can close, I want to thank all of you and those that are watching. I hope we have been able to share some of the thoughts and concerns. It's not just for the coast of Fairfield and Black Rock and Westport, but it is for all of our communities, because truly, we have also seen the storms that raises river levels that flood surrounding communities. Who would ever thought, how far are we from Vermont? When the river swelled, the devastation that occurred in Vermont. So climate change is real. It's not an issue of if, but when. But nevertheless, we want to remove that sense of helplessness to give you all the resilience, all the preparation that you need. And through experts in resiliency and proactive planning, that we can make the necessary investments to protect people's homes, protect lives, and protect our economic interests as well. So ultimately, I'm honored to be able to do this, but I'm also privileged to have these individuals give up their evening to be able to share the input and thoughts. And I want to also acknowledge and thank CTN for covering this as part of the Connecticut network, that they'll be able to share this information and be able to get that packet that you all have. We'll be able to put it onto my website. It's Senator Hwang, HWANG.com. We'll have the whole set put onto the website with links and information. Share that news with people. Have all the resources you need. I want to thank the panel again. God bless you. We're so grateful, and including the third grader who did a great job talking about Nemo. We live in a great community. We live in a great state.
Thank you, Tony.
And with that said, everybody have a safe, and let's hope all those storms don't hit.